The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello everyone, welcome to Rushcliffe for the 59th and final time. You find me at the beginning of this episode in a car park. Yes, again, this is the car park, or one of the many car parks, for a country park, which we are going to explore a little bit of in this episode. It stands, or it's part of, an old colliery site, the only colliery site here in Rushcliffe, which is now long gone. It closed in the 1990s. It's in the town of Cotgrave. Cotgrave, Cotter's Grove. For the 59th and final time in Rushcliffe, let's go walking. Today we're in the second of the two towns. It's the smaller of the two, but arguably it has a lot more to speak of than Bingham did. This is Cotgrave, located 8 miles to the southeast of Nottingham, and it's the only parish in the district that has a major connection with coal mining. As we've learnt over the past year, Rushcliffe from an industrial point of view is about traditional commercial activity like farming, as well as quarrying for gypsum on a grand scale. In Cotgrave it's different. Although small-scale coal mining took place in and around the Cotgrave area for centuries, nothing major was ever discovered until 1950. Opening much later than many others in Nottinghamshire, Cotgrave Colliery was established in the early 1960s, with large numbers of miners flocking to the area from other parts of England. A lot of them came from the northeast and lived on a massive purpose-built housing estate. That estate is the main reason why Cotgrave is so large today. The mine closed in 1994 and it completely devastated the town's economy. The coal seams below the ground still had millions of tonnes to be mined, but it was deemed to be of insufficient quality, plus geological faults rendered it unsafe. Ever since, Cotgrave has been bouncing back. It's had some regeneration and today it's a very nice place to live. Let's see how nice it is then, shall we? For one last time in Rushcliffe, let's go. We start our journey around Cotgrave in the car because there's some important and interesting landmarks that are a ways away from the main village. The first of these is the Nottinghamshire Golf and Country Club. Founded in 1991, this club boasts not just one but two full-size courses. That's a total of 36 holes. They cover an absolutely massive 240 acres. The two courses are called the Championship Course and the Signature Course. The Championship Course was recently renovated by the Scottish architectural company Kimber Golf. They provided new tees, water features and strategically placed trees. The Signature Course was extended from 9 to 18 holes in 1997, with the new holes designed by Peter Allis. Here there's a clubhouse complex, a sun terrace, a golf lab and a 9-bay driving range. The club hosts a variety of events as well as regional and national tours, but its most famous is the William Hunt Trilby Tour. It's all set against the stunning backdrop of what can only be described as a parkland paradise. It's no wonder this place has recently been voted the Midlands' best golf course. After all, it's the only one in the East Midlands to have 36 holes. It should be noted that near the golf course is a memorial to a Wellington bomber that crashed in 1941. The aircraft from No. 12 Squadron was on a gunnery training flight when the pilot met control problems. It hit an oak tree just short of the runway at Tollerton Airfield, next to where the golf's clubhouse stands today. A plaque nearby recalls 7 of the crew who were killed. Just up the road is the Rushcliffe Oaks Crematorium, a modern, environmentally conscious facility that opened in April 2023. The crematorium was designed with a focus on sustainability and the environment, using natural materials and local suppliers. It features a green sedum roof, solar panels, and energy-efficient lighting. The crematorium is carbon neutral and uses an all-electric cremator, which reduces CO2 emissions by up to 85%. Outside there's a reflection garden, a formal memorial garden, a woodland and a wildflower meadow. On the very same road as both the crematorium and the golf club is Shepherd's. This is a pub and carvery restaurant. Even though this is within the boundaries of Cotgrave, many people mistakenly believe it belongs to Rushcliffe-on-Trent. I can categorically tell you it doesn't. It's a chain pub owned by the Stonehouse Company. Interestingly, its car park also doubles as a pocket park and ride for buses to and from Nottingham. There's another pocket park and ride car park in Cotgrave itself. Just east of all of that is a small hamlet called Stragglethorpe. Now when I say small, I mean minuscule. This is the kind of place you'd be lucky to even register if there weren't any signs. It's a tiny cluster of scattered houses on the road between the A46 and Rushcliffe-on-Trent, a ways north of Cotgrave itself. Stragglethorpe, much like its namesake in Lincolnshire, contains the Old Norse element thorp, meaning outlying farm or settlement. It's not clear if the name is as old as the other Scandinavian settlements in the region. Instead, it has been suggested by local historians that its name is kind of like a nickname, referring to an area with a few small, straggling farms, hence Stragglethorpe. That description is apt, because there's really nothing to it. Immediately south of Stragglethorpe, though, is perhaps the most important area of Cotgrave Parish. This is a brand new housing estate that stands on the former site of the now demolished Cotgrave Colliery. Coal has been mined in the East Midlands since Roman times, as we already know, and Nottingham was no stranger to the black mineral. However, the area south of the city was bereft of any deep mines during the Industrial Revolution, and it wasn't until 1950 that major reserves were found here in Cotgrave. Its discovery would transform the village immensely. Cotgrave Colliery was established in the early 1960s, and soon afterwards large numbers of miners moved into the area. They and their families came from other areas of England, mainly the northeast. According to the locals, special meetings were arranged so that workers already established here could understand, for safety reasons, the dialect of the newcomers. The population of the village rose from about 700 to over 5,000 within just a few years. Many of the mine workers who hailed from the northeast built homes and raised families, and even today it's not unusual to hear people walking around the town with accents that wouldn't be out of place on Tyneside. Mainly, coal from Cotgrave was used to fuel Rushcliffe-on-Soar power station, and that fact brings the whole series full circle. Rushcliffe-on-Soar was the first parish we visited down here. The local economy was devastated by the mine's closure in 1994, which caused much bitterness. Like most Nottinghamshire mines, Cotgrave had continued working through the miners' strike in the 1980s. On its closure, it was reported that the seams still had millions of tons of coal reserves, but they were of insufficient quality. Local residents recount that the mine was shut because of geological faults and the discovery of a subterranean stream that posed flood risks. The growing remoteness of the seam face from the shaft didn't help either, and all of this drastically increased the cost of bringing the coal to the surface. The shafts were eventually filled in with concrete and all the associated buildings were demolished. By the 1990s, the site showed little evidence that a colliery had ever occupied the area. The immediate vicinity of the pit head was fenced off for safety reasons, and much of the surrounding area was given over to create Cotgrave Country Park. Developed on land reclaimed from the pit, Cotgrave Country Park features lakes, ponds, woodlands and rolling hills. The Grantham Canal runs through the park, and some of the old railway lines are still visible too. The lake is well stocked and used by anglers, with fishing platforms and reed beds for breeding waterfowl. There's a diverse population of wildlife too, including foxes, deer, rabbits, cuckoos, warblers, swallows and great crested newts. The main entrance to the park is from the car park on Hollygate Lane. The Grantham Canal's towpath is just one of the many well-surfaced routes that can be enjoyed here in all weathers. Two locks on the canal, namely Cotgrave and Hollygate Lane, can be found within Cotgrave Country Park, both with bridges that allow pedestrians and cyclists to cross the water below. Both locks were restored in 2002. Here's a bit more about the railway that linked Cotgrave Colliery to Ratcliffe-on-Soar. Most of the traffic from the colliery headed west via Colwick and over the Trent. To do that, trains had to travel along two lines known as the East Chord and the West Chord. The West Chord was almost entirely built on a reinforced concrete viaduct some 360 yards in length, carrying a single track at a height of 30 feet. It curved with a challenging radius of 11 chains. Comprising 36 spans, its northern end was built alongside a second viaduct opened in 1850 by the Ambergate, Nottingham, Boston and Eastern Junction Railway. So apparently that little lake is a dog pool. The idea is that you let your dog have a swim or a paddle in there. They're having the time of their lives, wouldn't they? They love getting muddy and wet, don't they? Dogs do. You try and get a cat in there. Not a chance. Not a cat in hell's chance. Okay, we're pretty much done with Cotgrave Country Park. It's much bigger than what I've shown you, and of course it would take me forever to walk around it. I haven't got that amount of time because the village itself, or town should I say, is big enough. So let's head down there now and let's start our main walk. Now, for several Rushcliffe episodes which have come out before this one, I've been staying in Cotgrave at this house you can see right behind me. This is on East Moor, and I've been staying there because that's an Airbnb. They're much cheaper than standard hotels. This feels a bit weird at the moment to be stood outside this talking about it when, you know, it's been my base for so much of this district, and now I can finally put it on the map. But yeah, this is my start point. It's also my end point. So let's go for our last walk in Rushcliffe. This first section of the main walk is greatly residential. We're in the heart of the massive housing estate built for the workers of Cotgrave Colliery. This estate dominates the town, but Cotgrave's history goes back a lot further than the time of mineral exploitation. There was certainly a Saxon church here a century before the Norman conquest. The Roman Fosway passes a mile to the east, so it's very possible that the Romans might have known this place too. Evidence of an Iron Age settlement was also found at Oathorpe Junction just to the east, and a 4,000-year-old Neolithic circular monument with 8 Bronze Age burials emerged slightly further north at Stragglethorpe Junction. Our first landmark is Ashley School. Cotgrave has a few schools, and this one is perhaps the most unusual. This is a community special school designed for children aged between 3 and 19 with complex learning difficulties. It operates a differentiated curriculum, and it's run as a charity, first registered in 1995. In 2018, the school completed a 2-storey extension funded both by the school and Nottinghamshire County Council. The project included demolishing 2 mobile classrooms and installing new boilers, water heaters and a pump. At the end of last year, children from this school created a Gallipoli mosaic in collaboration with a professional artist. It was installed in an outdoor area that the school eventually plans to turn into a memorial garden. To get to our next landmark, we've got to pass through some more residential areas, only this time the housing is a lot more modern, built after the estate for all the mine workers. Cotgrave has continued to grow despite the closure of the pit. Next up we have a cemetery. Now it's important to note that Cotgrave has multiple cemeteries, including one that's Anglo-Saxon. This one is an extension of the churchyard, which is just a few paces away up Plumtree Road. The cemetery was established in 1899 on land gifted by the 3rd Earl Manvers. The first burial took place in April 1900. Among the burials here are the parents of Robert Runcie, the former Archbishop of Canterbury from 1980 to 1991. His parents were Anne Runcie and Robert Runcie Sr. Now, as we know, there's never a bad place for a war memorial, but of course the cemetery is a favoured spot in many places. Here in Cotgrave, that's where you'll find the main war memorial, right here, with lots of poppy wreaths underneath it, of course. Well, we're in November right now, so it kind of makes a bit of sense, doesn't it, considering Remembrance Day was literally a couple of days ago. Well, it was for me anyway. This video's out in December, so even so, we'll still remember them, right? Now, while we're talking about former Cotgrave residents, that's the ideal time to mention this guy. That's Frank Robinson, but for 15 years, everyone in Nottingham knew him as the Xylophone Man. He lived in Cotgrave and travelled to the city centre every day, armed with a metallophone. He was an eccentric street entertainer and by far the city's best known busker. His favourite busking place was outside C&A in Listergate. Musically, he had quite a limited repertoire. His seemingly random hitting of the metallophone's bars was a familiar noise in the city centre, and despite his lack of musical ability, his excitable and enthusiastic approach to his instrument endeared him to the Nottingham public. It earned him something of a cult following. Little is known about Robinson's personal life or background. His real name only became widely known following his death in 2004. There was genuine mourning from many of the city's people. BBC Radio Nottingham placed a tributes page on its website, which within hours had hundreds of messages from Nottingham residents as well as people from much further afield. In 2005, a simple memorial was unveiled outside the store where he played. The plaque reads, "He played his xylophone here for 15 years, bringing a smile to the faces of the people of Nottingham." Back to the route, and on Scrimshire Lane near the church is an old wall, dubbed the 1,000-Year Wall. It's riddled with small holes, made by and providing a home for a large group of solitary bees. Next we've got the Manor House. Now, Cotgrave isn't widely known for being a place that has a lot of haunted houses. This isn't Calverton after all, but the Manor House is reputedly a very haunted building. Haunted by whom though? Well, that's up for debate. The Manor House is linked to both the White family of Tuxford and Earl Manvers. In 1556, Queen Mary rewarded Thomas White for his support in the Dudley Rebellion, and he became the owner of the house. The White family's main residence, though, was still in Tuxford. Later in 1741, the Whites sold the property to Earl Manvers, who became the Lord of the Manor. The Manvers' influence became ever more prominent with their sponsorship of the Cotgrave Enclosure Act in 1791. The Manor House sits at one end of Reisgate. Reisgate supposedly gets its name thanks to a literal gate that blocked entry to the road but was lifted to allow access. I say supposedly because nobody knows for sure. It's the Catholic Church next. Our Lady of Grace opened in 1990 to serve the needs of the parishioners of Cotgrave and the surrounding areas. A lot of miners were Catholics. By that time, coal had turned Cotgrave into an industrial powerhouse, and the population was at its peak. As well as the Sainsbury's across the road in that car park, you can see there we've got pig and pudding. I haven't got time to try that out myself, but apparently it's very, very good, so do call in if you fancy it, I suppose. So far we've not seen a pub here, but that's all about to change. This is the Manvers Arms, and by now the Manvers name should need no explanation. This has had a few different names down the years though. In 1822 it was called the Royal Oak, and 3 years later it was the Black Lion. It's been the Manvers Arms since 1861. Samuel Tim managed the pub from 1841 to 1871. He described himself as a wheelwright and a victualler, suggesting that running the pub was a part-time job. George Alfred took over after his father died in 1883. Alfred was a bricklayer, florist, cucumber grower and farmer, a bit of a jack of all trades by all accounts. The pub's current owners have a head chef with over 10 years of experience and family members with over 40 years of experience in the hospitality industry. The modern Manor Arms sports a lounge, 2 bars, a dining area and a function room. The pub serves locally sourced food and occasionally holds beer festivals too. On the same corner is Cotgrave C of E Primary School. This can trace its history back to its opening in 1720, but it moved to its current building in 1863. The building was constructed by, who else? Earl Manvers. Nowadays, Cotgrave has 2 schools. The other is Candleby Lane, which sits behind Ashley Special School. We'll pass that in a bit. It's the church for us next though, which stands opposite Cotgrave C of E School. The first part of the church was built in the late 12th century. The chancel arch is the only remaining part of that original building, and its decoration dates from between 1170 and 1190. The church has been altered and added to over the centuries, including in the 13th, 14th and 15th. The whole building was restored between 1877 and 78 by Evans and Jolly. It was also restored after an arson attack in 1996. During the plague in 1637, the church was used to store food. Men locked themselves away in the church in order to avoid infection and received disinfected goods passed through a hollowed out stone filled with vinegar. That stone is still in the church to this day. In the tower there's a ring of 8 bells, most of them made by John Taylor & Co. A new clock was installed in 1865 by Reuben Bosworth. It was restored by John Smith and Sons of Derby in 1977 when an electrical driven chime and strike mechanism was installed. In 2006 the clock was restored again and the dial was repainted and gilded in 2007. Now, standing close to the church, we have this, a cross. Now, we're used to seeing crosses all over the place. We've encountered several types, but this one here in Cotgrave, no one really seems to know what on earth it is. This 6-foot-high monument is known as the Cotgrave Cross. Made of ashlar, it's somewhat of a mystery. It's thought to be ancient, yet doesn't appear on any photographs or pictures before the early 20th century. Its site is near an old important junction, but there's no surviving medieval stonework around it. There were ideas of moving the war memorial to here and relocating the cross to the country park, but those were later dismissed as too costly. Cotgrave service station now, which has been serving the town since 1964. The station offers servicing for all vehicles, MOTs, repairs, petrol, and there's also a shop. It's located on Main Road, and so too is the Rose and Crown. The Rose and Crown was known as the Duke of Wellington in 1822, the 5 Bells in 1825, and the Victoria in 1853. It became the Rose and Crown in 1861. It's funny how the names of both the pubs here seemingly changed at the same time. The pub has an open plan layout with country wooden beams, old and new furniture, and open fireplaces. Its main bar has seating for up to 40, and there's a dining area with seating for a further 40, as well as a private enclosed beer garden. As of November 2017, the freehold for the Rose and Crown was held by I Group plc, formerly Enterprise Inns. Today, the pub and the Manor Arms are the only 2 in Cotgrave, unless you count Shepherd's. There used to be another called the Black Diamond. That was on Othorpe Road and was dedicated to the miners who'd come from elsewhere in the country. It was pulled down in 2007 and now it's a block of flats. I tell you what, while I'm walking around Cotgrave here, I'm getting treated as my own personal air show. There's a plane that keeps circling around. It's obviously come from Tollerton. Of course, with that being so close, Nottingham City Airport, this is probably the place that most of the planes fly over. And it just keeps going round, around, around. It's quite nice actually, because it's flying right overhead. Love it, love it. It'll keep me entertained actually on this next section, because this next bit is mainly residential with a footpath thrown in. It'll take us back to the main street where we've just come from. It's going to form a nice neat little circle. We're on sort of the final third, maybe quarter of this route. This has gone really quickly actually. Now, Methodism came to Cotgrave with some difficulty and with more than a little opposition. The initial stimulus appears to have been a visit by John Wesley to Bingham in 1770, an event that established Methodist groups in Nottingham and in Radcliffe. It was a Nottingham preacher who, in 1799, first succeeded in awakening the people of Cotgrave to the virtues of Methodism. He followed his Sunday morning address in Radcliffe with a visit to Cotgrave, accompanied by a posse of Radcliffe people. They weren't terribly well received at first. Indeed, one of the Radcliffe women, Mrs. Foster, was struck by a rotten egg thrown by a Cotgrave bystander. Both Charles Pierpont and the local rector did what they could to discourage its presence here. By 1818, however, the Methodists had clearly won the battle, because Cotgrave had a well-established Wesleyan society at that time, according to records. In 1838, their need for a larger chapel was met by the building which we now know as the Scout and Guide Hall in Chapel Yard, being just one of a number of new Methodist buildings erected around Nottingham in that period. The building, which we now recognise as the Cotgrave Methodist Church, dates from 1902, and in the early 1920s, plans were drawn up for a Sunday school, which was up and running by 1925. Now, some say since the closure of the pit, Cotgrave has become a miserable place to live. Many newspaper articles have used those exact words to describe it. That may have been true to begin with, but now it's different. The period that followed the closure of the pit was one of hardship and poverty, not uncommon in a former mining community. However, now Cotgrave has redeveloped itself into a thriving town once again, and the best example of that regenerative process would be its central shopping precinct. This was originally built at the same time as the large housing estates for the miners. It was regenerated between 2017 and 2020, with the demolition of several old buildings and the erection of new facades on some shops. A new children's play area, an expanded car parking area, and new landscaping were also all added. Now, this precinct is located not far away from East Moor, where I've been staying those last 3 times, so it's been a bit of a godsend really, just like a 5 or 10 minute walk away to just come up here, use the co-op or whatever else. Cotgrave Pizzeria is quite nice as well, let me tell you. Anyway, it's more than just shops, this precinct. There's also something called the Cotgrave Hub as well, and that's over there. Let's check that out. Cotgrave Hub is a brand new state-of-the-art health and community facility. It's one of the newest features of that extensive redevelopment and brings together a GP primary care centre, a library, a police station and the town council offices all under one roof. It opened in 2018. When built, the main objective for its constructors was to create a multifunctional building with one front door. Although identity and autonomy were required, security was paramount, simply because the police are based here. A shared main entrance forming a street from which different parts of the building could be accessed was successfully achieved. The building was able to be shuttered down to create pockets of space with independent access, and that enabled differing opening hours for its various occupiers. Last time we'll do this in Rushcliffe. 59 parishes visited. Dead opposite the precinct is Candlesby Lane School. This is the other primary school in the town, with Ashley Special School on the other side of its sports field. You'll note this is much newer than its counterpart near the church. Also fairly new is Cotgrave Futures, which is next door. This is a purpose-built community building which opened in September 2002. Like Cotgrave Hub, this was conceived as an all-inclusive facility and has something for everyone. It's managed by a small group of committed local people promoting healthy living, educational and recreational needs, and childcare provision. The plans for the centre came forward when it was realised that the youth club building at Cotgrave Miners' Welfare was coming to the end of its life. Cotgrave Futures was the way to replace it. Nearby is the Cotgrave Community Garden. This began in 2019 when a group of community members came together to create a green space on the old bowling green. The garden is a living example of agroecology, where people, plants and wildlife coexist in harmony. It's a place for everyone to gather, reconnect with nature and live in collaboration with the land. Over the road we have Cotgrave Leisure Centre. This opened in March 2011 next to the site of some former tennis courts. Although it's fairly modern, there is a refurbishment project currently in progress here. It started in October of this year and will be complete in the springtime. The project will include many improvements, but top of that list is the decarbonisation of the centre. Cotgrave Leisure Centre has a friendly and inclusive approach to fitness. Supporting all ages and abilities, inside it has a spacious gym, a 25-metre swimming pool and a sports hall. Now, this wouldn't be a mining area without a miners' welfare club, would it? Cotgrave Miners' Welfare started life in the 1960s and ran just like any other we've already come across. Later, with the demise of the pit, the club became more involved with the local community. It's since flourished to become a social club for all, but with its history still firmly entrenched in the mining industry. The club has a prestigious size, boasting several large bars, a garden, a family and snooker room, entertainment suites and one of the largest fully equipped stages in the East Midlands. The main hall is capable of seating several hundred people. The club hosted the Cotgrave Festival of Sports in 2012 and still hosts the annual Cotgrave Festival. The club also plays host to Cotgrave Pocket Park and Ride, the same scheme that we met back at Shepherd's. The club has a football team with grounds big enough to field 2 football matches at a time. There are large changing rooms and pavilion facilities for home and visiting teams. There are actually 2 football teams in Cotgrave. One of them is Kinnelton Villa, who are actually based in Kinnelton but play their home games in Cotgrave. The club was formed in 2005. The other is the one that plays here regularly, Cotgrave FC. The club was established in 1946 and originally played in the South Notts Realm League. They've been known under various names during their history. In 1983 they were Cotgrave United, following a merger with the local Colliery side. From 1991 until 2002 they were known as Cotgrave Miners' Welfare, then as Cotgrave Colliery Welfare. In 2006 they were known as Cotgrave Welfare, and then from 2011 as Cotgrave FC, following a merger with the local ladies and juniors teams. They've spent the vast majority of their history in the Notts Senior League. Detail online is scarce, but they were champions in 2007. Their best recent finish was 3rd in 2015. And there we go, we are back to Eastmoor and the house is right there. Absolutely fantastic. What a great place Cotgrave is. You know what, it felt very familiar as I was walking around because I've been here so many times and it's kind of become second nature to sort of know where to go, I suppose. But to actually walk around it and see it all in its glory is a great way to round off the Rushcliffe series. With that, people, that's another district down in Nottinghamshire. We've only got one left to do and it only has one civil parish. I'll see you at the end of December. And folks, that is that. Cotgrave is in the books and so too is all of Rushcliffe. That's been a fabulous journey around all 59 parishes and I've done it within a year. Thank you so much for following me around this part of Nottinghamshire. It's been a blast. With this one done, we've completed 234 of the 235 parishes in the county. There is but one left. Join me on December the 23rd when we tick off the one and only parish in Mansfield, and with it, the entire county of Nottinghamshire. I'll leave you with a drive up the A46 as we bid Rushcliffe farewell. See you later. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.